Welcome to the Brain Trust Driving Change podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield. And whether you're a leader, a coach, a salesperson, or even a parent, this podcast focuses on how to leverage the science of decision making to help you become a more impactful communicator and a driving force for change. Welcome back to the Driving Change podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield. Today I've got a very unique guest, and I think you're really going to enjoy Robin Treasure. Now, Robin has recently wrote and released a book called Heart-Powered Sales, and I can't wait for you to listen to Robin's background and her backstory. As you all know, at the Brain Trust family here, we've got neuroselling and neurocoaching and our whole thing around the brain. But what I find really, really interesting is you can't really talk about the brain without talking about the heart. And if the brain is the engine, the heart is the fuel. And like many vehicles that might have a clogged fuel line, if your heart's not fueling your brain, then you're not the holistic 360-degree effective communicator and connector you need to be. And I love that Robin has really taken the heart side of the brain so much deeper. And that's what we're going to unpack today. So Robin, welcome to the Driving Change podcast.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm really excited to be here.
So, I told you in the pre-show, everybody knows you got to start by, we don't care how much you know until we know how much you care. And we can't tell how much you care until we really track you back to your origin story. So take us back, tell us your why, tell us who influenced you the most and what formed your values and what ultimately led you to be a thought leader in this space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually grew up in the mountains of New Mexico in a very rural area, and my parents were hippies. My parents had migrated out from upstate New York and kind of followed their dream of homesteading, buying some land and building a cabin on a mountaintop, and that is indeed what they did. And so that's how I was raised. I was raised with my parents who were very loving and very true to their hippie ideologies and hippie roots. And as I grew up in this community there were many other hippies in that area as well, I was really raised in a culture of people who just valued being in the present moment, caring for one another, enjoying life to the fullest, and clearly not being super career oriented or pursuing wealth. That wasn't really their objective. Their objective was to be free and happy and build a cabin and live modestly and happily. So that's how I was raised. The gift that gave me and the greatest influence that I got was certainly from my parents and from the rest of the people in the community, which is to simply be yourself, be authentic, don't live under any pretenses. I was so fortunate to be raised without those filters and masks that some people are subjected to when they're growing up. And without those filters and masks, I was able to just be me and to feel into who I was as a person. And who I was as a person, I started even at an young age of maybe 7 or 8, kind of having these experiences of being aware of an energy that connected us all, an energy that I could tap into that felt much larger than myself, that allowed me to be attuned to what other people were feeling and to kind of reflect their joy back to them or be empathetic when they were sad. And it felt like a real gift that came from something much larger than myself. And that gift, fast forward a couple decades, would end up becoming a great gift when I came into sales as kind of a second career in my life. I was able to approach sales from a place of service, from a place of empathy, from a place of connecting to people and understanding what they need and want. So that was a really great gift. Now, rewind again back to my hippie childhood. I mentioned there was no great pursuit of wealth or career or climbing a corporate ladder. I don't think I even heard that phrase until, college and after college, right? And that too was a gift in a way, because I was able to my parents encouraged me to do whatever I wanted, right? My dad always said to me, Robin Ann, you can do anything you set your mind to. And to me, that wonderful community that I was raised in was great. And, living in a cabin that my parents had built on a mountaintop was wonderful, but I wanted more for myself. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to go to a nice liberal arts school, college on the East Coast. And I ended up doing those things because I set my mind to it. I didn't have the money to do it, but I found a way. I ended up living abroad in a couple of different countries. And so all of those were gifts that were given to me because I was given free rein to pursue what I wanted to pursue. And as a result, later in pursuit of wealth in a meaningful way, that's what led me to sales. Wow, what a background. So I'm picturing a little pigtail, toe-headed little girl running around in a peace sign Volkswagen van I got all these images in my mind and in New Mexico and then learning such valuable lessons. Isn't it amazing how when we don't have the constraints and the barriers that the world puts on us and those controls over us in an environment where that's open, some people would look at that story and go, oh my gosh, I could never even imagine. What did you even do? Did you have internet? Like there's so many people that couldn't even imagine being in that situation. Yet that's kind of how we're originally designed to live, right? Without those the constructs of our cultures and the constraints of our society. So your purpose and values were born out of that moment with parents who then said, hey, this doesn't have to be your way. Just know, don't conform to the patterns of the world, but go be who you were made to be. That's exactly right. And it was such a gift to be given carte blanche, free rein, do what you want to do and be who you really are. It's served me very well. So if I'm not mistaken, and I'm pretty sure I'm not because I did my homework. So you spent some time, you said overseas. So you spent some time, you apparently became very fluent in multiple languages to the point where you actually became a translator. Tell us a little bit about that story. That's right. So in my first career, I was actually an Italian translator. I just fell in love with languages. And in college, I studied Italian, went on to get a master's degree in Italian translation, and then moved to Rome. And I moved to Rome saying, I'm going to become a translator. I moved over with no job, 5 suitcases, a little bit of money in savings, and one name of a friend of a friend. Wow. And I landed and I said, let's see what happens. I ended up staying there 4 years and having a great career freelancing as a translator, mainly in the film industry. So much fun. And I really was testing the limits of what I could achieve when I had a huge amount of faith, right? And the willingness to do what it takes to make it happen. Well, and you get into this, you talk about it in your book, but adopting that mindset of possibility and having that as a driving force behind it, as opposed to the negativity that so many of us are bound to. When it comes to being an Italian translator, the closest thing I can relate to that was I had to be able to explain the cooking instructions on the back of a Chef Boyardee can to my little sister growing up. Does that count? You think that would have put me qualified? And probably not. Not in general terms, but maybe in the Midwest, yes. In my counted. Midwest farm boy redneck terms, like we thought Chef Boyardee was Italian. Like that's what we knew, right? That was your cultural experience. Exactly, absolutely. Right? Yes. Oh, that's funny. So let's talk a little bit about what led you. So you had your life's journey, your life's experiences, and you had all this amazing, rich content to pull from your own experiences. And then you decide one day, I'm going to write a book. Mm-hmm. Yes. When did you have that epiphany that you wanted to write a book? Maybe the seeds were planted a long time ago. Yes. And then you actually did it. So what led you to wanting to write a book, to then picking what you wanted to write the book about, and then having the actual, ability and determination to write the book? So tell us a little bit about that. Yes. So after my career as an Italian translator, which was a 15-year career, I got into sales, and specifically in the health and nutrition industry, which I was very passionate about. I became a B2B salesperson for a company that made nutritional supplements, and I was selling these to healthcare practitioners who would use them in their practices with their patients and clients. And I became very successful at this. Yes, even in those earlier years, I did have the seeds of a book in me, but I didn't know how that would unfold. I wasn't quite sure. I proceeded to enjoy 5 years in my role in B2B sales, and I was able to 10x my territory during the course of those 5 years into a multi-million-dollar territory. I enjoyed great relationships with my clients. I built those relationships and really cultivated them. And I attributed so much of that success in 10xing my territory to simply the relationships that I had cultivated and the way I showed up in a spirit of service to those clients. And I was I was considered the top performing rep at the company, and other reps would come to me and say, like, what's your secret? What are you doing? And so I started to kind of put it together. Like, what am I doing? How am I able to achieve this? How am I able to, exceed my quota month after month? And that's how the book was born. Is I just started putting together what are my best practices. And Jeff, as you know, you've read the book, my best practices are a little unconventional. I may arrive at a similar point, but starting from a different point of origin. And that it's really all about connecting to people with emotional intelligence and also being guided by intuition. And I feel that these are incredible skills that we are all capable of, but some are more tapped into that than others. So that's what I wanted to share in my book. I truly felt compelled. I wanted to share this because I want people to experience the ease and joy that I've experienced in my life and in my career. Of course, I've had to work hard as well, but putting all those elements together is what I tried to do in the book of how to work smarter, not harder, and how to be guided by your intuition and how to connect to the energy that's available to us that makes us kind of supercharge the momentum that we have in our work. So I started putting those pieces together, and it was, about a year and a half ago where I really started writing in earnest. And I wrote the book, and yes, that took quite a bit of dedication, as you alluded to, but I did make it happen, and I published it in February of this year, 2022, and I'm very proud of having achieved it.
Well, you should, because it's a small list of people that have the ability to write and produce a book in their lifetime. Many people desire to, but it takes, I can relate, it takes a lot of work.
Yes.
Now, what you described, and we hear this a lot from a lot of our clients that we work with in sales, is if I ask them, hey, why do your best salespeople succeed? They don't know. And they'll use phrases like, well, Robin's good at building relationships, and Jimmy, he's just a product expert, and so is just good at knowing that they have all these things. But how? Mm-hmm. And what you are describing is you decided to do the introspective look at what you were doing intuitively in order to make it so that others can do it intentionally. Because without that, there's inconsistency. And that's what you did here and with your book, is taking that self-reflection on, well, what am I doing? And why does it work? And why is it different? So when you talk about the heart, one of the things that I like, I like anatomy and physiology. I don't know why I'm a nerd that way. So you get into a little bit of that. So tell the audience a little bit about some of the nuances of the heart itself and why it's important to understand it from almost an anatomy and physiology standpoint, because that's where you get into how it's so important in all the things we do, especially in communication.
Yes, and it truly is. And so the heart is an incredible organ, in terms of in physiological terms, but it also, and so of course it's the fuel, as you mentioned at the beginning, the brain is our engine, the heart is the fuel. So it's fueling our physiological actions, but it's also connecting you to intuition, to insight. It's connecting you to your desires, and your desires are what are going to propel you forward. Desires are something to harness because of the momentum that they can give you in your efforts. So the heart is underutilized in business because we tend to be very logical and cerebral. But when you can feel into what you love about your work, what you love about your clients, what you love about this day, what you feel grateful for, that's all centered in your heart. And in physical terms, but then also just more energetically, right? And so by tapping into that, that doesn't mean you're neglecting your logic. It doesn't mean you're neglecting your well thought out and well planned processes. Those need to be there too. But what is it that gives you the knowledge of how to flex and flow within your process, within your framework, when you come across obstacles, when you come across setbacks and challenges? Your heart energy is going to give you that on a moment's notice. It takes no time to simply connect to your heart and feel gratitude, feel love, reset your energy so that you can show up in the best possible way for your clients when you're talking about sales. And there's an incredible institute called the HeartMath Institute. And I really have loved learning from them. They put out some great publications. Anyone can just Google them. HeartMath is one word, HeartMath Institute. And they've released some really great research, including how the heart impacts us in business. And so when I was writing this book, I was learning more from them about, what is the role of the heart? And I've always felt guided by my heart. I've always said that I follow my heart, right? But what is really going on here? So I learned more about that. One of the most incredible things is that the heart produces the largest electromagnetic field of any organ in the body. And the magnetic energy that is produced by the heart is 100 times greater than that produced by the brain. And when you think about magnetic energy and magnetic force and how you show up when you walk into a room with a client, they may not be consciously aware of your energy, but they can sure feel it subconsciously. So it's incredibly important to bring more awareness to the power of your heart in any situation, and certainly in sales.
Isn't it funny that's why I asked, starting with the organ of the heart and with the anatomy and physiology piece, because it's almost like we use the word heart in this esoteric metaphor for feelings and intuition, when it's the organ itself, though it produces those results, the organ itself is what drives that. And I love that a lot of people don't realize that the heart has neurons.
Yes.
Like the body has neurons throughout it, and the heart has a lot of neurons. So to connect it to the brain, and that what you're talking about, that feeling, and we talk about emotional contagion a lot around here, which is now being studied and has been validated as a real thing. The heart is what really produces that energy that you feel. When people talk about the gut feeling I have around that person, it's probably due to the energy that their heart is producing, which is coming out of a wellspring of who they are in their identity, which is probably not from a healthy place, right? So you can sense that. Now, it may be that they're just a bad person or they're a sociopath, but usually they're bringing I call it the junk in their brain trunk, but it's really the junk in their brain trunk that actually emanated from the hurt in their heart.
Yes.
Right? It caused them to not show up in a way that made me go, man, this person's got a lot of positive energy. I really I don't know this person, but they walked in the room and I can feel a lot of positive energy. And I think that's what you're alluding to, right?
That's exactly right. And you put it more beautifully than I could have. That's exactly what it is. Yes. And I just wanted to mention quickly, I just love what you said. Yes, the heart has neurons. There's a two-way communication between the heart and the brain. The brain sends signals to the heart, but the heart sends signals to the brain. And there's this two-way communication. And in studies that, again, HeartMath Institute has done, studies into intuition, the heart and the brain are picking up on external stimuli before the external stimuli actually occur. And often it's the heart that's perceiving those even split seconds before the brain does, or anywhere else in the body that stimulus is perceived. So it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, that's that predictive ability that the heart has that then lets the brain know. We think of things cognitively, right? As well, once I can think about it and I can cognitively analyze it, then I can define it. Well, there's so much happening well before you ever reach that part in the cognitive intelligence part of your brain. And we'll talk about emotional intelligence in a minute, because even that can sometimes be almost looked upon as a different thing, but it emanates here from the heart. The thing that has always struck me with the difference between the heart and the brain is, if you really want to break it down, if I'm brain dead, they've got to pull the plug to actually kill me. If my heart stops beating, they ain't no need to pull a plug because I'm dead. Because the brain being the almost subordinate to the heart can keep the body alive if it's beating for an indefinite amount of time. The brain can die and the body still lives because the heart is that powerful. Yeah. Now imagine if we really tapped into the power of the heart that's influencing our brain every day, and how we showed up and how this is where I want to get into a little bit about one of the things we see a lot in our world with our managers and leaders that we coach, is the ability for self-regulation of emotion. And it's part of emotional intelligence. However, what I wanted to ask you about, and you get into this a little bit in your book, is this idea, the self-regulation of emotion. It's something, it starts in the heart, then it goes up into the brain. The brain has a feeling, has an emotion, and then it tries to validate and it tries to analyze and define what that emotion is so that it can know what to do about it. But we try to fix it through thinking. And when you've coached people in the past, how do you help them understand that the emotional regulation piece, first of all, define it for how do we recognize an emotion that emanated from the heart? What does it mean? And then how do we then how do we turn it into a positive energy before it turns into a negative emotion that made us reactive, which made us transactional versus relational? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. And yes, so that self-regulation is so important. And it's really the starting point of emotional intelligence, to become self-aware, first of all. So self-aware without judging, but noticing and becoming aware of, what are you feeling right now? And when you turn your attention inward to understand, what am I feeling? You'll notice those feelings will be emanating from your heart, not from your brain. You may have thoughts that are spinning, but it can be, the feelings are actually located in your heart. Another thing that you can do is pay attention to your body as a whole. Your body, we have somatic intelligence. It's another form of intelligence. Your body communicates to you in signals, and it can often be the bridge between what your heart is trying to communicate and what your cerebral intelligence knows, right? And so paying attention to signals in your body will help you with that first step of self-awareness. What am I actually feeling? Just notice what, are my palms sweaty? Is my gut kind of clenching up? How do I feel right now? Oh, okay. Put a label on it, right? I guess I'm feeling really nervous. What am I feeling nervous about? Kind of walking yourself through those emotions. And you made a very important point. How do you transform that into something positive, so that it doesn't derail your efforts, and so that you can actually leverage the positive, that positive emotion? That comes back to, okay, so now I've identified, I'm aware, I'm feeling really nervous right now. How can I shift that energy into a more positive state? Okay, now I'm going to focus on my heart again. Let me breathe and just release that tension. Now, what do I love? What am I grateful for? That's the best way to shift your energy. You may be really anxious and nervous about a meeting, or expectations that are being put on you. Something stressful just happened. There is always something to be grateful for. So when you can focus your energy on that, you can then shift that energy into a positive state. And now you've self-regulated. You've self-regulated by breathing and by shifting your attention into something more positive, something that you're grateful for. So that's one piece of that emotional intelligence. Then, of course, the other piece is being aware and attuned to what other people are feeling. And your job is not to manage or regulate their emotions per se. And your job is not to be a therapist. Your job is not, but your job is to meet them where they're at, understand how they are feeling, seek to understand by asking more questions about their state, and show empathy and show an understanding through story, which you've done an incredible job with. I've heard you talk about it before, about the impact of story and how well you can illustrate your understanding of someone's situation by sharing a similar story with a positive outcome that your client may be seeking.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating to me on the emotional self-regulation piece. The better you get at that, and then transferring it over to recognizing the needs of others, the more you actually start to lead with recognizing the needs of others, which reduces your own stress and cortisol. But because we're self-preservation animals, those feelings we get, and we start to identify them, they're born out of a place of self-preservation, which is rooted in fear, and which is rooted in all I do is start to think about myself and anything that's at risk for me. And now my heart almost gets cut off, and I'm all living up here in fight or flight mode in my brain, and I'm in risk mitigation mode. And how in the world can I serve another human being when all I'm worried about is me? So this whole movement toward the pronouns thing in the world, I don't aspire to even get involved in that. But I will say that I think I've been saying this for years, the biggest mistake we have as communicators is we are focused on the wrong pronoun. We're focused on I. Mm-hmm. And the minute we transfer that over to they and focus on other people, naturally our heart starts to, I believe, you tell me if I'm wrong, the energy of our heart starts to come out of a place of servitude, which naturally is linked to gratitude, which naturally is linked to empathy. And it's really hard to throw yourself a fear-based self-pity party if you're focusing on serving others. Is that what you found?
100%. 100%. As you said, we are biologically wired to self-preserve. So it's understandable that we can easily slip into fear or anxious thoughts. And yes, it's all thoughts. It's all thoughts. It's all up in our head, and it pulls us out of our heart and it disconnects us from our heart. So how do you kind of hack that and get back into, get out of that self-preservation mode and fear-driven thoughts, which it's unfortunate. They're there because they want to preserve us, but they can actually become the saboteur that trips us up, right? And damages the whole thing. So how can you get out of that? Well, it's exactly what you just alluded to. It's about simply ask yourself, how can I be of service? It's not about me. This is not about me right now. And if you're going into a sales meeting and you're nervous, oh gosh, what if I mess this up? Oh gosh, what if they don't want to buy from me? What if I don't make my sales quota? It's not about you in that moment. It's about how can I best serve this client? What do they need? Let me anticipate what they need, but I'm not going to assume I'm right. I'm still going to ask my questions in proper discovery to understand. But how can I serve? And that question alone will take you back into your heart, and it'll take you out of your head with those thoughts that are spinning around and not serving you at all.
That's good. And we joke around with a lot of traditionally trained salespeople we work with, and sometimes we're just really overt with it. We say, you end up showing up in front of the customer with commission breath.
Yes,
and
100%.
You're already operating out of a place of fear, and therefore your communication, your energy, all of it is really transferring over to distrust emotions that are being triggered in the mind of your prospect. So you talk a little bit, I do want to talk a little bit about intuition. I know that's a big deal, and you get into a lot of that in the book. You like and I love it too, the analogy, the metaphor of intuition as a GPS. Mm-hmm. So what do you believe is intuition? How do you define intuition? And why do so many people struggle to identify it and use it to its full power and potential?
Mm-hmm. So intuition is an incredible gift that we all have. Some have it more developed than others, but we all have access to intuition. And intuition is, yes, it's our GPS. It's guidance. It's the guidance that we receive that is always there available to us with the intention of helping us to achieve what we want and succeed in life. The question is, if we're using the analogy of GPS, well, a GPS connects to a satellite. So in the case of intuition, what is it actually connecting to? Where is the information being derived from when we receive that intuitive hit about something? Well, it's deriving from an energy. It's an energy that connects all of us. And in my book, I like to refer to it as loving consciousness. It's just simply an energy, a consciousness that connects everyone. And this consciousness wants us to succeed. It wants us to have the best in life. It wants us to enjoy life. And when we receive those intuitive hits, it's always in our best interest to follow those signals, even if it doesn't make logical sense. And there are many incredible business leaders that I admire, such as Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx. And she said that when she was building her business in the earlier years, she was very much guided by her intuition, and it served her incredibly well. In the business world, if we just say, follow your gut, people can get behind that, right? That makes sense to them. But I do think it's important to dig a little bit deeper and understand, well, where are those signals coming from? What is my intuition connecting me to? And everyone can have a different definition, and even how it shows up for you. Maybe it is a gut feeling. Maybe it is more in your heart. Maybe you are one of those people like me, like I say, I follow my heart, right? But regardless, you asked a very important question, which is, what is it that prevents us from accessing this intuition? And I view it like, if you picture an old school camera and you put different filters on with that old school camera, well, we have a couple of filters that unfortunately don't serve us very well, and they cloud our vision and our access to our intuition. One is fear, and one is wishful thinking. Those two things will cloud your access to your intuition. Your intuition may be telling you, you know what? This prospect, unfortunately, is going to take you down a dead-end road. But we don't want to hear that. So we have wishful thinking. And we put on, we ignore that intuitive hit, and instead we go with, well, cerebrally, logically, this prospect looks really good on paper, so I'm going to keep pursuing it. You end up spinning your wheels and wasting time and energy, right? That's one example. Another example may be an intuitive hit of, wanting to pursue a new business opportunity, and your intuitive hit tells you this could be really great, but it's a little bit of a daunting situation and you're afraid. So that fear, again, is another filter over your camera that prevents you from seeing clearly and understanding that intuitive hit. So whenever you're kind of playing with intuition, which it's really fun to play with intuition in low stakes situations, and just ask yourself, well, what is my intuition telling me right now? Do I go right? Do I go left? Do I choose this one? Do I choose that one? Play with it and get familiar with those feelings and just see what it's like. And as you go forward in more difficult or challenging situations, first, as you kind of settle in, get quiet, try to access that intuition, ask yourself, are there any filters on my camera? Do I need to remove that filter of wishful thinking? Okay, let me take that off, set that down. Now, is there a filter of fear here? Let me take that one off and set it to the side. And then you arrive at a more truthful answer from your intuition.
Well, you got a lot of really good stuff in there. I think this is so powerful because, I mean, you and I talked about that. I share with you, I'm a person of faith as well. And I believe my intuition is connected to the creator God, right? I believe that the spirituality that I feel and sense, that's my intuition is connected. I don't know that everyone's thought about it that way though, that intuition is, as a GPS, it has to be coming from somewhere.
Yes.
In many times we tend to think of our thoughts as intuition, when that's the noise that's probably preventing us from actually hearing the intuitive things that have to come from the satellite. And I think that's a very powerful concept. But the other thing that you touched on right there in that last couple sentences that I guess I'd never thought about, and maybe I'm feeling a little bit of, Ben, you might have hit the nail on the head with me, is I've never been too much of a fear-based non-decision maker. I think I'm more the other. I think I might be an unrealistic optimist. And even against the intuition, maybe sometimes I'm like, well, I can do it. No. And so I waste a lot of time and energy chasing down something that might have looked like a positive thing, but wasn't going to end up being where I was ultimately trying to go. So I think for the listeners out there, which of those filters are primary for you? Because I bet you one of them's primary. Some of us probably have a primary fear filter a lot of the times, and others of us might be just super optimistic, overly optimistic, thinking we can solve any problem and help any person and anything's possible. Well, that can also be detrimental to the path you're trying to go down if you're listening to your intuition. And that's what I heard you say. So I need some counseling on not being too much of a unrealistic, positive optimist sometimes. Is that what I hear you saying?
That's right. The world needs more optimism, and optimism is always a good thing. I really do believe that. But there is a difference between being a positive, optimistic person and seeing the good in things and believing like, well, I want to go out. I can achieve this. I can do this. I think those are excellent. And I wouldn't discourage that. But wishful thinking is a little bit different. In my book, I give a couple different stories about dating. I think dating is a fantastic analogy.
None of us have been wishful thinking in dating, I'm sure.
Right? And, that's just such a perfect example where, I remember and I share in my book a story of being on a date with a man whom I'll call Mark. And Mark was, just absolutely, had so many great qualities to him. But during our several hour date, he didn't ask me a single question. Okay. We talked and talked and talked, but really it was him talking in his monologue and me nodding and doing active listening and everything else. Right.
Were you really doing active listening after about the first 10 minutes of that situation?
Oh my gosh. After a while, I was definitely.
You were not actively listening at that point.
That's right.
You're placating.
And I had this wishful thinking. Maybe he'll show interest. Maybe he'll ask me questions. And that never happened. And my intuition was telling me right from the start, he's fabulous, but not for you. Right. So that wishful thinking. Yes, I knew that. And I could feel it immediately.
So to me, I think that's a big home run for all of us to process through is number one, listen to first of all, you have to identify the tenor of your intuitive voice. You have to recognize it. Because if you don't recognize it, it'll get caught up in the swirl of all the cognitive voices that tell us lots of things in our head that aren't the intuitive voice that's trying to guide us in the right path. So I think starting to learn to recognize what the intuitive voice is versus your own noise is important. And then identifying the filters that you might place that prevent the intuitive voice from actually being the guide that it's designed to be is really important. Now, this is all, I know like people I thought this was about sales. Well, of course it is. Yes. It is, because these are the conversations that we need to have that really impact how we show up every day in all of our relationships. But particularly when you go into a heightened risk scenario, which is what sales tends to be in our brain.
Yes.
These things get manifested. And I believe, and maybe you would disagree, or I don't know, it gets exacerbated. So whatever you show up with in a higher risk situation is only going to get exacerbated if you're not in control of those feelings and those emotions.
It is so true. Sales presents high stakes situations, right? And yes, any kind of wishful thinking that you have is going to be heightened the more high stakes situation you're in. And, so again, that wishful thinking, for example, can really cloud your ability to listen to the truth of what someone is saying and hear the words behind their words, hear what they are saying truly and what they're not saying. And rather than pursuing it with wishful thinking of, I think he's saying that this product is a really great fit for his business, when no, that's not actually what he's saying, right? It's important for us to hear the truth.
Well, and we know that a lot, and we call it overcoming barriers, but traditional sales training calls it objection handling.
Yeah.
So many times when we get one of those barriers, our brain that's in wishful thinking mode is the yeah, but. Yeah, but if you only knew that you're not thinking about this correctly, you'd see the value in what I'm trying to tell you need to do differently, right?
So true.
You covered fear already. You touched on that. I was going to dive in, and we're almost out of time. It's gone so fast. So for those listening, I mean, the book is so rich in all of these topics, and it takes Robin does a great job of taking you on a journey through all of this, from the heart piece all the way through her story, all the way through a model in which you can implement and activate a lot of these concepts. But I did want to talk about one, because I hear it, one last one, because I hear it over and over and over again. And maybe I just might have been a little bit experienced this myself. And that's the imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. How does that sabotage us as a pitfall in the ability to lead with the heart?
Yeah, imposter syndrome can trip us up. I have to say, I still suffer from it often, from time to time anyway. And imposter syndrome is that logical brain that comes in. And because we are wired for self-preservation, like you said, imposter syndrome wants to keep us safe. It wants to keep us in a safe place of, you stay in your sweet little corner and don't try to be a big shot, and because you're not qualified and you haven't done enough, and play it small in order to play it safe. That's what imposter syndrome is doing. So imposter syndrome has really good intentions. It's trying to keep us safe. But in doing that, then it limits our growth. And we're all on this planet in order to reach our highest potential. In order to reach our highest potential and evolve, we have to take risks. We have to stick our necks out a bit. And, like me metaphorically, taking that plane to Rome and landing without any job or, real plan, but I was evolving. It was the next step in my evolution as a person to go out. And who was I to do that? Well, who was I to not do that? Why not? Why not? Right? And so with how do we circumvent imposter syndrome when it wants to hold us back and keep us playing small? I think, again, the quickest way to circumvent it is to take the attention off of yourself. It's not about you. Who is your target audience that you are meant to serve? Ask yourself, revisit the questions of what do they need? What problems are they dealing with? How can I help them with that problem? If the answer is yes, then go and do it. Take a few risks. Put yourself out there. At the end of the day, our logical mind trying to keep us safe with, imposter syndrome is telling us, well, you don't have these credentials and those qualifications. Do those really matter? Or does it matter how you can show up and serve? Because we're all here to help one another and to enjoy life. And so what better way to do that than to take those risks and keep evolving, keep growing, and keep driving change, like your podcast says. Yeah, keep driving change. And change involves a bit of risk. It involves a little bit of sticking your neck out there and dealing with imposter syndrome. But the benefits of overcoming that and really serving people and helping people, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, so good. And, one of the fastest growing, most successful restaurants in history is Chick-fil-A. And what's their model? That no matter what store you go into anywhere, anywhere, they will greet you with "Welcome to Chick-fil-A," and the next question they ask is, "How may I serve you?"
Mhm.
Every person across the board. And if we start, what I heard you say was, why don't we adopt that in our own lives? Hey, welcome to this conversation. How may I serve you?
Yes.
Imagine if we showed up every day with every interaction with "Welcome to this conversation. How may I serve you?" I mean, you naturally already have the heart for others, and it pushes all of that stress and fear and imposter syndrome and all those barriers out, and allows there to be an open communication that's built on genuine concern and authenticity.
Yes, absolutely. It really does. And it takes the pressure off and it makes things more enjoyable. And you're just there to serve.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe I can't. Maybe I just have to be there to listen. Right. And maybe I can't serve you. And if I can't, that's okay too, because we were supposed to interact for a purpose, and whatever that looks like, it looks like. I love that. Well, tell the audience where they can find out more about you, your trainings, your coaching, your speaking, your book. Like, where should we go?
Yeah, so you can go to my website. It's robintreasure.com. Robin is with an I, robintreasure.com. And there you can find out more about my coaching. I do offer sales coaching one-on-one, and then also to groups. And I do sales training for organizations. And you can find out more about my book entitled Heart Powered Sales. You can find that directly on Amazon as well.
Excellent. And it is a great book. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed your heart behind why you wrote it, and it aligns so well with what we believe here at Brain Trust. And I think the audience is going to love this. We could have spent, another episode just going into each chapter of the book, but I want people to go read it. And as I told you, I don't know where these conversations are going to go, but I felt like today was a lot of value to me, and I think to our listeners. So we really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's really been a joy being here. Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you really soon.